And welcome back to the show, everybody. Excited to be back in studio. Been on the road, U.S. Open Travelers Championship, and then this week I'll be at the Rocket Classic in Detroit, Michigan, on to the John Deere as the countdown continues for my first ever trip to the Dominican Republic and Casa de Campo, which is the best golf resort in the Caribbean. Taking that easy flight from Miami to La Romana Airport. The good folks at Casa are going to pick me up, and the rest will be history, as they say. Looking forward to a fantastic time. Hey, Gilles Gagnon knows all about Casa de Campo. He's been on with us before. The director of golf emeritus, great guy. He is back down in the DR after traveling around with family in the United States. Gilles, first off, man, it is good to see you back in the home office there in the DR.
Yeah, it's nice to be back. I mean, I love to travel, visit the family, but, you know, down in the DR, it's kind of nice. You know, I just kind of put my car in neutral. I'm on the golf or at the beach, and weather's been great. And, you know, we have wonderful people here working, so happy to be back.
You know, it was interesting. I've been monitoring the weather as we get closer to our trip down. Excited about meeting you in person, by the way. We've been talking a lot via Zoom and our podcast and radio show. The weather looks good. I mean, you haven't really even hit the 90s yet. So the weather looks fantastic.
You know, we were in Florida, and I was also in Nebraska with the other grandson, and I want to tell you, it was hot. And here, it's actually been very, very comfortable. They say there's something about the Sahara dust a little bit that I guess we're getting. So it's been a little cloudier than normal. But yeah, it's been. I tell you what, it's the New York grandson thought, you know, he said, oh, it's going to be so hot, and he got here and he was very comfortable. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah. Hey, before we get back to Casa, I wanted to get your thoughts. I appreciate your thoughts on a lot of things. And I know being in the golf business for as long as you have been, you appreciated what happened yesterday at the end of the Travelers Championship, Cromwell, Connecticut, which, by the way, TPC River Highlands is a Pete Dye golf course, one of his early courses that he built. What'd you think of the finish there? Keegan Bradley closes with a birdie to beat Tommy Fleetwood.
You know, I'm not quite sure you know, what Tommy and his caddy were thinking about. But, you know, the announcer, I can't remember which one it was, said the only thing you got to make sure is he carries the front bunker. And by hitting that pitching wedge, he put that front bunker in play. He just happened to hit a little left. So, yeah, I don't know if they, you know, what their thought was, but there was space behind the flag. And, you know, I don't think he could have been long with a 9-iron, obviously, because Keegan hit a hell of a shot. You know, that was you know, classy, just wonderful shot right at it. And then Fleetwood pushes it, then he gives him the exact perfect line. He misses it to the right, and then Keegan obviously read that and knocked it in. The chip in was also pretty good. That was amazing. You know, he gets in the rough, chips in, and he gave himself a one-stroke penalty there the day or 2 days before. So it was a great finish, you know, and it's a nice golf course, beautiful. The weather was great. And, you know, PGA is exciting. You know, I like to watch the PGA Tour. You know, I guess because I'm such a crazy about golf and I love the game so much, and I played a little competitive golf, and I know what it's like to come in at the end there, and you know, I don't care if you try to win the screen door open, it's
right.
Still, you know, or the member guess, you know, the nerves are there, and so it's really exciting to watch.
Yeah, Russell Henley, by the way, was the guy you were talking about, chipped in there for birdie on the 72nd hole, and after Saturday's round, called a penalty on himself. Nobody else saw it. And he said he would have felt terrible if he'd gone on to win and hadn't called that penalty, which kind of exemplifies what the game golf is all about. All right, Keegan Bradley now has put himself in position to choose himself for the Ryder Cup team. Gilles, what do you think? Arnold Palmer, 1963 at East Lake in Atlanta was the last time we had a playing captain. It used to happen all the time. In the last 60 years or so, that hasn't been the case. But what do you think? Should Keegan be the captain and also be a participant?
You know, I think there's a long time, you know, between 63?
63, yeah.
Yeah. That, you know, there's so much pressure on these players now, and there's so much going on. You know, again, I've never been inside the rope and anything like this. I was at the year that they won at Kohler. Herb Kohler, Mr. Kohler and Natalie were friends, and they invited us. So Mary and I were there. We stayed with them, and we also were in the room after they finished, where, you know, the side place where all the players came out, and, you know, they were all crazy and loved it. But the pressure was so so it's so much pressure. So I don't think you could do, it's almost like flying a plane and being a stewardess at the same time or something. It's just,
Interesting.
I don't, I mean, it might not be a great example, but I think you got to focus on one. And, he's not in as a player yet. It was kind of surprised that they went from not picking him up the year before or the
Right.
last as a player, and all of a sudden now they pick him as a captain. It was kind of a little unusual. First, I'm sure people thought it was kind of a unusual decision, but he's very passionate, obviously, about this Ryder Cup. So, you know what? I think he should. I mean, unless you can't find enough good players, which I think there are, but I think Europe's going to be really tough. I think they're going to be really, really tough, even more than in the past. So it's going to be interesting. But I think you should just stick with captain, I think.
Well, you're going to have to get your grandson some tickets to the Ryder Cup there at Bethpage since he's up in the New York area.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've already asked me, and he says, "Boy, they're really expensive." He says,
They are.
I don't know what they are, but they are, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you're going to have to call in some markers to get us.
Yeah.
Hey, your friend who's been on our show, and obviously he has a place down there at Casa de Campo in the Dominican Republic, Miguel Angel Jimenez, wins yesterday at Firestone for the fourth time this year, Gilles. I mean, he is having an incredible year. Won in overtime there, beat Stephen Alker, who's a great player himself on the over 50 tour. What do you make? I assume you've exchanged text messages with Miguel?
Yeah, we just sent one yesterday, actually. I had a nice bottle of red wine and that we have here. And so I was with the grandson of Marilyn, my wife, and we sent him a picture, the three of us, and say, next time you're here, we're going to share, this bottle of wine. And, it can't be what Ripple when when I was in college.
No.
That's a pretty good bottle of wine, I can tell you that. And I didn't pay for it, obviously. Somebody gave it to me. I'm too cheap to buy that $300-400 bottle of wine. So he texted me right away, thumbs up. And yeah, he's been playing amazing. I mean, and Steve Alker, by the way, his caddy is a great friend of mine. He's from Nebraska, and he caddied for Jerry Pate. He started with originally what he did. He was the books. He does the book, your yardage book for the tour.
Right.
And then getting hooked up, and then it moved on to a couple players. Now I can't remember every one, but he had 4 or 5, and then he ended up with him, and so that was. That was a good move for him, and obviously he's doing all right. But, it was kind of, my heart was kind of we were cheering for both of them yesterday. And, either of them was great that they won. But, yeah, I don't know. He's hitting it. And, I mean, he birdied 17 and 18 and then parred and then birdied. He hits it. He still hits it flush. I mean, really.
Yeah, he does.
And, he goes out there. He's an happy-go-lucky guy. He likes to... when he's here, he'll play in the morning about 9-10 o'clock, play with his wife, and he'll hook up with a couple, like I told you, his friend, their Kino, and sometime we play, and then he'll go home and cook some nice lunch, and then bottle of wine, and then next thing you know, he's out on the range and hitting balls. So he deserves it, and I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's a great guy. I met him when he was in my hometown of Birmingham at the Champions Tour event there. And super nice guy, and spoke very highly of you and Casa de Campo. And again, it just makes me more excited to get down there. All right, one other question before we get to Casa, and I know you were watching intently as the Florida Panthers won back-to-back NHL titles over Edmonton. And Gilles, it has been a long time since we've had a Canadian franchise hoist the Stanley Cup. I mean, like 30 years, Gilles. What's going on? Are you upset? Is it just the way of the world? What's going on?
I think, again, I've been out of the game now for quite a while, obviously, since I've been at Casa de Campo for 44 years. I mean, I've stayed in touch and I coached, obviously, in college and played semi-pro, International Hockey League at the time, which was one grade below. I don't know if they're having problem with salary because of the Canadian dollars also. This could be a problem. See, I'm not quite sure how that works, but I'm sure they probably get paid in dollars anyway, but their tax obviously is very high. So I'm not so sure, how they can manage all that. And they seem to just, they have some quick team, like the Canadian this year were fast, but when you get to the playoff, you got to be big, because I mean, it's brutal. It's probably the hardest, I think, play. I mean, they're playing 7-game series and they travel from the, east to west now. That was a long trip. I don't know what's going on, but, Toronto seems to well, I don't want to use the word choke, but they seem to choke every year. And then Montreal, they have a pretty good team, but he's a young team right now. And I don't think they need to put a little meat on their team. They're a little more, strength and bigger guy. And Edmonton, they got the best player in the NHL. And, I guess they focused on him. And, when you get a guy that as good as he is, but they'll put enough guy on him that just basically just shadow this guy all day. And yeah, I hope one of the it would have been good. I'm a big Panther fan. I love the Panthers. I have a place in Florida also that I go to, and I've had some friends that actually work with the team manager a long time. So, but yeah, I think it'd be nice for a Canadian team to win and get back in. And I don't know how long it's going to take, but I thought Edmonton had a really good shot after they're down 3-0 and come back. I mean, that was a heck of a comeback, and then they seemed to lose their focus or they ran out of gas. No idea, but too bad.
Well, it's interesting, Gilles, because if you listen to the great one, he was on the pregame show, postgame show on TNT, and he knows hockey, obviously, but he was focusing on a couple things you just said. He said Florida's fourth and fifth lines were really good, and they established those at the end of the regular season. And McDavid, he said, listen, Florida's whole focus was take him out of the equation. I mean, let's hammer him, because they didn't think the second, third, fourth lines of Edmonton could beat him, and ultimately that was the case. I thought that was astute on the Great One's part. And they also touched Gilles on the fact, as you mentioned, that the taxes in Canada are crazy. There's no state income tax at all in Florida. So a lot of these players love playing for Florida or Tampa Bay, etc. So I think you're right on. I think there's a lot of factors there.
Well, I think the best move they made is to get Marchand to get in there. That guy was really the key of winning the Stanley Cup, in my opinion. He scored a tying goal and the overtime goal in one of the game, and he is a tough little guy. I mean, maybe he's big. I don't know how big he is, but tough little guy. I mean, he was in there, and I think he was the key to winning the Stanley Cup this year. I think they, like you said, they have this little, that guy that they can put in, and they can rest the other two a little more. I mean, the game is so fast now since they took the red line out. So these passes, can come from behind your net all the way to the opposite team's blue line. And so it's much faster. The shift of maybe a minute and a half. Now they're out there 40, 45 seconds and they're out. So it's a much faster game. And I think if you don't have a third and a fourth line, or even just at least a good third, you're going to get beat up. You can't last, the playoff that long.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Whenever they would roll some old highlights of the Great One in there when he was winning at Edmonton, I mean, the size of the players now, Gilles, it is amazing how much bigger they are and faster they are now, with all due respect to back when the Great One was playing. Watching the old footage and then today's footage, it is a completely different game. But I guess you could say that about all team sports. All right, let's talk a little golf here. I know you've been on property. Teeth of the Dog, Pete Dye's baby, is undergoing a facelift. We've talked a lot about it on our show. Jerry Pate, World Golf Hall of Famer, is involved in the restoration project. How's it looking? I know the reopen is in December, around Christmas time. How's Teeth looking right now?
Well, I was really surprised. I mean, the greens are pretty much, the grass is starting to show up there. As a matter of fact, the ninth green looked like it was pretty much all covered. The fairways are still planting. We have 4 or 5 fairways that are, again, in pretty good shape. Excuse me. But it's coming along really well. There's a lot of work. They got all the bunkers now, all the lining, and they're starting to put the sand in. The only thing I'm concerned a little bit is I believe it or not, is the outside, the rough, because that's where all the machinery is going through. So that's going to be a pretty good, interesting, how much we're going to have to put that back together, as soon as possible, obviously, to give it a chance to get back. So you can't just have like gorgeous fairway in the rough, is mud, but it's amazing. I've worked with Pete Dye when we built, Dye 4 in Ladomata Country Club. I spent a lot of time, walking with him and seeing the progress. But it was one of those things that you weren't expecting necessarily a date we were going to open. We were just building the golf course. This thing is, you're looking and you go, okay, now you're counting the days, right? It's probably about 90 days for the grass, to grow to the point where I think we could start mowing, or somewhere around there. So it's, it's a little scary. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, come on, guys, let's go, But we're making great progress. And according to the schedule, we're on schedule. And, if we get continue to get good weather. We've had some rain, some nice rain at night. You don't want to have the rain where it starts washing off some of the areas. But number 8, where Pete is, that I was there the other day and it's in perfect condition.
Wow.
Pete says, no matter what happened, guys, that number 8 needs to be perfect. So around the green area and all that stuff where his plaque is, and it's absolutely spotless. So it's kind of like, I don't know, you must be upstairs going, okay, guys, you better, I don't care if everything's bad, but that hole's got to be perfect.
And that is great. Keegan, the legendary golf course architect who's built so many of the incredible layouts in the United States and parts around the world, but he was so proud of Casa de Campo and all the courses there, Teeth of the Dog being his favorite, and his ashes were spread over the property there, Gilles. I mean, he absolutely loved the place.
It was really funny. It probably was the happiest time, and I've spent, like I said, I was at Crooked Stick with him. I've been at TPC in different places, at his house in Florida. And for some reason, when he got here, he just relaxed. He loved it. The people loved him. And, he would go out there and walk in the morning and then, walk around, take some notes on things he wanted to get done. And then he'd run the people on the golf course and he'd say something, well, how are you doing? That was, how are you doing?
Right.
And they'd say good, whatever. And then he'd say, well, I'm Pete Dye, and people always never believed it. That's so, he signed some autograph for the card and he says, well, make sure you love it and let me know if anything, he was really involved, in the place. And it would be interesting today. I have a funny story. Probably Jerry Pate's going to kill me, but we're walking. You talk about Pete. Pete always introduced. So we were walking last year, and before we're doing a renovation, and we ran into 4 people, and he said, hey, how are you? You could tell they were young guys, young golfer. And he said, hey, I'm Jerry Pate. And I said, Jerry, they don't have one idea who you are. Jerry was so mad. And then I explained to him, oh, that's the guy that threw Pete Dye and Dean Beeman,
Right.
in the water. And then they kind of agree, it's amazing how much these young people, like my grandson, I said, Miguel Angel Jimenez, he had no clue who he was. You know what I mean? It's just, the young, obviously, Jerry Pate doesn't realize, but he's 70. Is Jerry 70? I think he's 70 years old.
Yeah.
So that's a long time. And the new generation are more into Scheffler and these people, or maybe, legend like Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, but the rest of it, I always said, you're here today, and it's not going to take very long before, when I'm gone, they're going to say, who was the guy there? I can't remember the guy who was down there all these years.
Well, I mean, it is interesting, Gilles. Jerry won that U.S. Open at Atlanta Athletic Club in 1976. So we're talking almost 50 years ago.
Great 5-iron, by the way. See, those are things I can't. My wife always, sometimes you can't remember somebody's name, but you can remember a guy that hits a 5-iron shot, Atlanta, and to win the U.S. Open, or some of the great moment in golf or even in hockey that. Bobby Orr, for example, when he's the Stanley Cup and that picture when he's going parallel there. Anyway, but yeah, kids. I mean, he's really into golf also, both of them. But some of these names for them is just, and they're not watching the senior tour, obviously.
No, not at all. It is interesting, though, because we mentioned Keegan Bradley. He won his PGA Championship at Atlanta Athletic Club. And, of course, Jerry won the U.S. Open there. So great history in the city of Atlanta. All right, let's talk Casa, Gilles. Looking back, and every time you're on, you give us some great stories, whether it's about Sean Connery, 007, whether it's about former presidents who came down and played, Bill Clinton. You mentioned Bill Clinton, President Bush, among others. You got to give us another story here, Gilles. Come on now. Looking back over the years, who have you enjoyed rubbing elbows with in Hollywood, music, or wherever? Come on. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you got for us?
About John Daly. I've never said anything about John Daly.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so he came down to Casa de Campo. They had put a group together where it was like, when they send people go to these camp and they're for baseball.
Right.
And so they did something for golf. We had Roger Mulby over here. We had, a whole bunch of players. Scott Hoke was here, and John Daly came. Well, this is right after let out PGA, and they were trying to make sure they were going to try to get him off, off the sauce a little bit. So he was in a villa. We took everything out, and he was going to play 9 holes with different groups of guys. One day he wanted me to play, and first day he gets on the tee and he says to me, do you have any golf balls? I go, what do you mean, do you have any golf balls? He gets to the tee, has no golf balls. I mean, and he just was not really excited about, doing this, obviously. But I still remember that we were on 17 of the links at the time, and I just smoked one, and the other people that were with thought that was pretty long, and he bombed one there. We're hitting 3-wood, and he's hitting a little flip sand wedge, to this par 5. And he was really interesting, and his personality hasn't changed much. He just was friendly with people, but he didn't care that much. He wanted to play and get it over with. But then he hung around with the guys. But that's the thing that I remember, getting to the first tee and says to me, "Do you have any golf balls?" And I go, "What do you mean?" I said, "You come in to play, you don't have one golf ball?" But yeah, about 2 weeks later, I was at the PGA show, and I was
What
there
funny.
with my daughter, and we're in line, and everybody's signing autograph and everything. And he stands there, and he sees me kind of I was not about to cut the line. I don't do things like this. So and he yells at me, "Come here, you little bastard. Get down here. We'll sign that autograph so you don't waste any time." So to this day, every time he sees me, that's it. I don't know if it's good to put that on the show, but I'm the little bastard from the DR. That's John Daly's name for me.
That's funny. And John won his PGA Championship 1991 at Crooked Stick, Pete Dye's place. So it's funny how it all kind of comes together.
Pete Dye said something. Sorry, Pete Dye said something about it when he built Crooked Stick. He never thought anybody would carry any of these bunkers that John Daly ended up carrying. So I think it was 10, 11, 12, 13. At the 14th, a dogleg left, if I remember. And these guys were hitting it because there was kind of a little waterway that came to the left side of the fairway and turned. And everybody was hitting to the right. They had 200 yards left of that green, and Daly just blew it right across that ditch there, and he had a sand wedge in his hand. So that was the thing. That's when Pete started thinking and started doing a lot of things where he said, 10 years down the road, these guys are going to hit it 320. I still remember him putting a bunker. I said, they're not going to get to this thing. He goes, they're going to fly it over. And trust me, he was right. He was right. He knew that, he also said John Daly went from like 290 average to 310. And he said that was because John was lifting weight.
Yes, different kind of weight.
Yeah. And the equipment also, So you did put me on the spot, so I hope it wasn't too bad, but that's my John Daly story.
No, that's a great story. And I think back to that PGA Championship at Crooked Stick, and he was hitting driver on holes that people before the tournament began were like, you can't hit a driver here. It bottlenecks, it's crazy, and he was hitting it so far, and he was the last alternate to get in that week. Drove all night just to get into the PGA Championship as Nick Price had pulled out the last minute. So that was the beginning of the great run for John Daly, and what a career, what an interesting career he's had, to say the least.
Very interesting. And there was somebody there that I'm sure that you know about it, but I don't know if your listener do know. There was a person there that got hit by lightning at that tournament that year.
Yes.
And John ended up paying for the daughter, I guess, to go to college.
Yes.
For his college, and that was a very sad story. He was just running. The guy was running to his car, and he put his hand, and he got hit by lightning. But yeah, John Daly is a funny guy, but he's got a really big. I'm not necessarily a fan of the way he is now, but he has a big heart. I mean, a lot of people don't know that story, and I think that was very, very special for him to do that.
Yeah, it was. Hey, tell me this. As the sun sets at Casa de Campo, and I try to tell people, and again, I'm going to go there for the first time in the latter part of July. I'm told that is just so beautiful. I mean, you have the ocean, you have the river running through the property, you're up high looking down. Gilles, it's got to be magnificent, that sunset at Casa de Campo.
Yeah, I think you call it the green flash. I guess when the sun hits the ocean at a certain point. We're in the Caribbean, and we were talking a little while ago about, the waves are never huge. Here it's, we get some wind, but it's not as bad as the other side, the other coast, for example. And it is spectacular because you got amazing sunset, and being at Altos, you can look down the river, the Chavon River, from you have the amphitheater up there where we have some great concert. And it is, it's obviously, I've seen it where there's 150 homes here, and now we have over 2,500. So it's become, a city almost. But, we're never, like, even this weekend, it was a holiday weekend, and I thought the place would be, buried with everything. And it was, it was busy, but it was still enough that, you could go to a restaurant and feel like, you're not, there's people everywhere. But, I don't, I've lived obviously in Canada. I live in Michigan and, New York. And this place is magical. It really calms you down. You go and there's nice breeze close to the ocean. And then you go to Altos and, you look up there down the river and you might see a little boat coming down there from, one of the fishermen. Catalina Island, if you go there, it's a beautiful beach. So yeah, it's really a special, and I know there's beautiful places all over the world. Don't get me wrong, and I've been some beautiful place, but yeah, this place definitely has something very special in my heart, and it's changed my life, and I love it, and I can't wait for you to be here. I will make sure that I put the dates down that I will be here to meet you because I've been so honored to be part of your podcast now, 6th time you said. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to meet your wife, your daughter, and showing you a good time here.
Gilles, you're setting the record for most appearances on our podcast/radio show. I think you are establishing the record. We're going to have people wanting to get close to you. It'll be impossible.
Listen, I'm very picky about who I talk to, So no, it's been great. You do a wonderful interview. You do bring some of my stuff, history that I've had here and how I feel about this place. And I work for a great family, obviously, the owners here. And we're very, very fortunate. And I think when you're here, you're going to see it. I mean, I want to make sure you have, you go different places, not just because a lot of people come here, they play golf, and then you go, Altos de Chavon. They go, where's that? How can you be here and miss that? It's beautiful. There's restaurants up there. There's the amphitheaters. There's the history of the Taino Indians, where's the first people that were here, and the island of Hispaniola. And so there's a lot of history here, and it's pretty cool. And I'm sure you're gonna love it.
And that looks down, right? When you go to that, you're up high, up on top of the mountain, right?
Yeah, you're about 300 feet above the river. So dive 4. When you play dive 4, for example, when you're on number 10, you go down number 10. When you get halfway down, a lot of time I take people there. I'd say, okay, now just look forward. And then when you get halfway down the fairway, you turn around and you look back and you see this artisan village that sits right on top of the hill over the river. It's pretty impressive. It's amazing because it's just hanging over the edge. And it looks like it's 500 years old. And basically it was opened in 1982 by Frank Sinatra when this place was owned by Golf and Western.
Wow. Good stuff. I cannot wait. I mean, you're whetting my appetite, as they say, Gilles.
You're bringing your clubs, obviously.
Yes, I'll be there. I'm going to play a little golf.
It's tough though now with your wife and daughter, we're going to have to figure out. By the way, the best time to play golf, everybody fights to play at 7:30, 8 o'clock. Best time to play golf here is about 1:30 in the afternoon.
Nobody's on the course. Yeah.
And the other thing is that, the hottest time of the day when they come in the winter, people are so, it's cold where they are. So between about 8:30 till about 2 o'clock, that's the hottest time of the day. So you tee off at 1:30, it cools down, the breeze comes up, you can see the sunset, as you finish. And then you don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go play golf.
I mean, that.
It's really weird. Like even today with the grandson, we're going to play at 2:45 because, it stays light till about 7:15, I think is the sunset. In the winter, it's about 6. It's really early at 6:15. Then it'll go to 6:30. But it's the best time to play golf. But everybody wants to play between 7:30 and 9:30.
Yeah, of course. Get done early and do your thing. But yeah, I hear you. That's why I always listen. And I take your recommendations very seriously, Gilles.
Good. You might not have a choice, by the way.
I know, exactly. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, me. Well, anyway, Gilles, always a pleasure. Have fun with your grandson. We will see you very soon.
I look forward to it. And if we don't talk before that, might not be at the airport, but I'll be at the front desk.
There you go. Thanks, Gilles.
Right. Take
Cheers.
Care. Take care. Bye-bye.